Now welcome to another Let's Talk Some Star Wars, where this time we have another agree or disagree question, and I will be reading and responding to some of the comments left on the poll afterwards. But this time the question is, The Phantom Menace is better than Attack of the Clones, agree or disagree? And right away moving to the results, we will see that 62% of people agree with that statement, and 38% disagree. Which surprises me maybe a little bit. I thought this would be actually a bit closer. I'm not surprised that the Phantom Menace won, to be honest with you, from what I hear from most people. It seems Attack of the Clones is their least favorite movie in the trilogy, in the prequels, which it is for me as well. And I say least favorite because I still like and enjoy the movie. I love the movie. It's not the greatest in the prequels. I will say that it maybe has the most problems of the three, and I think the biggest problem is it tries to put a lot into a little. There is a lot going on in that movie. There's a lot it could have and maybe should have explored, I think. It maybe even should have been two movies, and I think the animated Clone Wars series maybe helps this movie the most because it feels like that the Clone Wars could have and should have been in this movie, considering the name is Attack of the Clones. There are also maybe a few other issues with Attack of the Clones. Not that we can't argue that the Phantom Menace doesn't have any issues, because many people do. But I've always felt like the relationship between Padme and Anakin could have been handled a bit better. That the whole movie, the whole trilogy really kind of revolves around us buying into the love and romance between these two. That they would so quickly fall in love and get married, and that in the next film, he's so obsessed with Padme that he would forsake the galaxy and join with Sidious for the chance to save her. But anyway, before I get too into it, let's get to some comments, but not before. Just quickly saying thank you to everybody who votes, comments, or watches these or any of my videos across both the channels. Also a huge thank you to those who support the channels on Patreon and make my Discord server, if I do say so myself, the best place on the internet to talk some Star Wars. Anyway, as usual, we kick things off with the top-rated comment left on the poll, and that is simply the one that got the most thumbs up. And this time it comes to us from Justin Luther, who said, "Not gonna lie, I love the weird, hard-boiled detective vibe George tried to inject into Attack of the Clones." And I do appreciate that George Lucas was always trying to make each of his movies or each of his Star Wars movies feel distinct and different. That yes, this movie, especially the first half of it, kind of has this very hard-boiled detective vibe, as Obi-Wan is on the hunt for the attempted killer of Padme, and we are following one clue after another. And I really wish, and I was kind of saying before, I wish sometimes Attack of the Clones was just two movies, because I feel like it tries to be a lot of different things all at once, and all of the things it tries to be, or all of the stories it tries to tell, kind of suffer from that. I really wish the first movie of Attack of the Clones was simply Obi-Wan's search, all the while Padme and Anakin are on the run. And I mean really on the run, not that they go to Naboo and suddenly the assassin is kind of forgotten and they're having picnics in the field and they're having dinner and visiting mom and dad, and which is in the deleted scenes, mind you. And they're good deleted scenes, I'm not saying that. They do add a little something, though I can understand why they were deleted. But anyway, I do wish the first movie was kind of, we unravel this mystery of what is going on with the clones, and we find them, and maybe that's how it ends, instead of tacking on the big battle of Geonosis at the end. Anyway, just have the first movie focus on the detective work and Obi-Wan unraveling all these mysteries along the way and putting the pieces together, and eventually he finds Jango Fett, and that's kind of the climax of the movie, is finding Jango, learning about the clone army and all of that. All the while Anakin and Padme are on the run together and having actual assassins chasing them. Again, they're not having picnics in the field. And you might say, well, that kind of sounds like a boring plot. That doesn't sound like enough. And I would say, well, look at The Empire Strikes Back. That's not exactly the greatest plot in film history either, per se. But the writing was on point. The writing was so solid that you don't really think about the fact that Empire Strikes Back is really not about a whole lot. It's about trying to find Yoda, and then he does, and he trains with him for a little bit and learns about the Force, all the while Vader is looking for Luke, and he's trying to capture his friends to set a trap, which Luke will fall for, and in the end, Luke barely gets away, but Han Solo is captured, and there's your movie. In other words, again, I think the first half of Attack of the Clones could have been turned into its own sort of Empire Strikes Back-esque story. And then you have a second movie that is really about the Clone Wars and how they start, and about Anakin and Obi-Wan during it, kind of like what the Clone Wars animated series was. But either way, that's just my thought on it. Again, I like Attack of the Clones. I'm not trying to knock it or say it's a terrible movie. I just think there are ways it could have been better. Though I agree, the hard-boiled detective vibe it has at the beginning there especially, it worked. I think that could have been a fun movie. Could have been fun to go all in on that, again, while Anakin and Padme are on the run. Alright, and now we move on to this comment from the anonymous critic who said, Attack of the Clones featured many pivotal moments in the original 6 movies. It showed us the first steps towards Anakin's dark turn, the start of the Clone Wars, the discovery of the Clone Army, the rise of the Separatist movement, and the start of Anakin and Padme's romance. They don't always receive fulfilling resolutions or explanations, but at least the ingredients are impressive. The film's cinematography and visuals are all gorgeous, and the final battle on Geonosis is glorious. And the funny thing about this poll, and it does happen from time to time, is it felt like there were more people defending Attack of the Clones or pointing out why they think it is better than there were people saying good things about the Phantom Menace, which, of course, might be a bit strange considering the results were almost 2-1 here in favor of Phantom Menace. But anyway, I agree, there are a lot of really good things in Attack of the Clones, and again, there are a lot of really good things in there, which is, in my opinion, you can certainly disagree with me. But in my opinion, that's part of the problem with the movie. It tries to do a lot of things all at once, and it doesn't feel like it has time to fully flesh them all out. Moving right along, we have a comment here from Blue Diamond Director who said, "I don't hate either, but I think The Phantom Menace tells a more complete story than Attack of the Clones, which felt like we were missing a bunch of the story. The rise of the Confederacy, Dooku, Sifo-Dyas, all feels lost in the bigger picture. The Phantom Menace tells how Palpatine manipulated himself into office, all the Jar Jar haters conveniently forget Padme got him into office, and how Anakin was discovered by the Jedi and how Anakin and Padme met. That was what we needed to be told, and the film did just that." And I do agree that The Phantom Menace does feel more like a complete story. It is the story of how Palpatine gets himself to become the Supreme Chancellor, and how Anakin Skywalker is found, and how he ends up being trained by Obi-Wan. It answers a lot of questions for us, and when it ends, it's not like we're left wondering a million things, or like a lot of it feels unexplored, other than maybe Darth Maul. There could have been more Darth Maul. But it feels like a complete story that alludes to more to come instead of just kind of a cliffhanger or an end. Not saying Attack of the Clones necessarily just ends, even though it kind of does. But I do think it does a good job of being both its own story, being its own movie, as well as being the beginning of a trilogy. Okay, and now on to this comment from Jedi Shill, who said, "Making Anakin unlikable in Attack of the Clones for some people will ultimately be the greatest mistake of the prequels." And I can kind of agree with that one. I've said before, one of the most important things the prequels needed to do, or should have tried to do, was to really make you like Anakin Skywalker, and to the point where you dreaded seeing him turn into Darth Vader, where you were really rooting for Anakin despite knowing that, yes, eventually he is going to fall to the dark side, which is part of the reason why I think Attack of the Clones was so important, and why the romance between Anakin and Padme was so important, because that's the crux of everything. If you buy into that romance, if you root for that romance, everything else just works so much better. Revenge of the Sith works so much better. If you really understand and feel like, yes, Anakin is madly, deeply in love with her, and she's in love with him, and they do anything for each other, even potentially forsake the galaxy, and then in the end he falls to the dark side anyway and it all goes wrong. It needed to be a Greek tragedy. It tries to be a Greek tragedy. It tries to be kind of Shakespearean in that way, and I don't know that it pulls it off as well as it needed to, or could have, or should have. And if you do like Anakin more, and I'm not saying he's completely unlikable in the movie or in Attack of the Clones, but he does kind of come off as, I don't even know what words I would choose to describe him, but he's not the most likable character ever in Attack of the Clones, and if that were different, and if you sell that relationship more, I think it just makes everything better in the trilogy. Alright, and one final comment here, and it comes to us from JC King, who said, "As a diehard prequel fan, I love them both, but The Phantom Menace has been my favorite Star Wars movie since I first saw it when I was 6 years old in 1999. I don't think that'll ever change." And yeah, I know exactly how you feel. I saw Return of the Jedi when I was 5 in the theater, and I have loved that movie ever since. It will always be my favorite movie, Star Wars or otherwise. And so doing these polls is just meant to be fun. It's all in good fun here. It doesn't prove anything. It doesn't mean anything. It's just a way to talk some Star Wars. And since I think people are enjoying this series, I do want to continue it, so you can take to the comments below and give me your suggestion for which movies we should do next. I will pin a comment down below that you can respond to with your suggestions and put it in a agree or disagree that this movie is better than this one, agree or disagree kind of format. But either way, that is going to be all I got for you this time. So now it is your turn. Take to the comments below and tell me what you think about what I or anyone else had to say. Or vote for which movies we should do next. Or leave a question for a future lightning response video. Whatever you want to do down there. Leave the comments. Let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.